Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm Donna Jordan. I'm so proud to be with you. Thank you. But of course, you're not here for me as much as I would love that. You are here for Erma, aren't you? It's a wonderful, wonderful evening. In my years of work as a television journalist, you know, I've told so many stories. Stories about people who actually have the ability to reach out and touch and change and affect other people's lives. Well, this is the remembrance of a Dayton girl. A Dayton girl whose life and talents ultimately went beyond Dayton to the rest of the world. She touched millions of people, people that she never even met. Let's take a look. Her name was Erma, and she was born, raised, and educated right here in Dayton. She attended Patterson High School and went on to complete her education at the University of Dayton. Throughout the years, this wonderful woman gave countless millions the gentle warmth of her humor. To celebrate her spirit, we invite you right now to join us for an evening with Erma's friends. Good evening. We're so happy that you could join us. You know, it was back in 1987, Erma and Bill Bombeck revisited the UD campus. And at that time, you know what? Erma told this story. It's a wonderful story of how her writing career really began.
The catalog said, English literature, Brother Tom Price. And it didn't begin to cover what he was all about. He was a philosopher. He was a critic, I mean, he was an actor, and he was a man who saw each student individually. And he knew I wanted to write. He knew that from day one. And I told him I didn't have time because I worked a part-time job to come here. And he said, go home and do something for the Exponent, which was the magazine here at the University of Dayton at the time. So I must tell you, you sort of slide things under the door and wait until the great critic comments on it. And he saw me one day outside of the cafeteria, and he said 3 words to me. That's all, just 3 words. It was to sustain me for the rest of my life, I think. He looked at me and he said, you can write. And I thought, I won't believe him. And then I thought, no. I mean, he's a man of the cloth. I mean, he'd have to be on his knees for the rest of his life repenting for this if he didn't mean it. And I believe Brother Tom Price. And it seems like it was only yesterday, and actually it was 22 years of syndicated columns and 8 books ago. Incredible.
And she could write, couldn't she? First up of all of Erma's friends, her son Matt. Matt, what a pleasure to have you here. You know, we heard your mother tell the great story of how she got started as a writer. Now, what do you think of when you hear and you see that clip that we just showed?
Well, it's very inspirational. You know, I think my mom, she never saw herself as an entertainer. She didn't see herself as a celebrity. She saw herself as a writer. That's what she did. When people ask me or my brother or my sister, you know, what was your mom really like? I'm always at a loss for words, because I think if you read the books, if you read the columns, that's really who she was. There was no pretense about her. Her work, you know, spoke of her life. They were inextricably bound. That's who she was.
The way she's bound with Dayton as well. You know, Matt, like Mom, you're a professional writer. How did you get started, and did your mom influence you in all of this?
Yeah, I think she did. I got started actually late in life. You know, my mom, I think, as you can tell from the clip, I think she knew early on really what she wanted to do. And for me, it didn't come until much later. I started writing when I was in school. I was in college, and I got interested in film and television, and went to film school. And you know, really struggled for a good, you know, 3 or 4 years after I graduated, but kept writing and kept at it, and was diligent about it. And that, I think, I hope I got from my mom.
Yeah, you've got good genes, haven't you?
I hope so.
Time will tell, but I'm sure they're just fine. This next guy that I'm about to introduce is nothing but trouble, our very own D.L. Stewart. He got his start in the mid-'60s as a sports writer for the Dayton newspapers. You know, we love him as a syndicated humor columnist and an author. And you know what? On his resume, you know what it says? It reads, I got it right here, a 4-time Pulitzer Prize loser. DL?
Donna, let me point out that's a very old bio. It's 9-time Pulitzer Prize winner.
Why am I not surprised,
I don't
DL? Okay, now tell us about how you got started in the business.
Well, I started out, I thought I was going to do a general interest column like Jimmy Breslin, Mike Royko, that kind of stuff. And I would talk about the street people of Dayton, the characters, the streetwalker with the heart of gold, and the wino with the noble background and everything. Well, first of all, I found out that we only had one streetwalker in Dayton. And we had her part-time. We had to share her with Columbus, so we got her Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So I did find a wino, and I sat down with him. I said, Mr. Wino, why are you, we're interviewing away, and all of a sudden he threw up on my notebook. And I said, I don't need to go out and do this. I can get this at home. So I went home. I started looking at my kids. And, of course, we blame Erma for my column because she inspired me. I was looking in the paper one day, and I see, Erma Bombeck. She's writing about her kids. Who knew that kids could be valuable? So I thought, no, sorry, Matt. So I thought, well, she's got the motherhood stuff locked up, but what about fatherhood? No one, this was 25 years ago, no one was writing fatherhood. We didn't even know when fatherhood begins back then. I mean, there were some theories. One theory, fatherhood begins at the moment of conception. Another is that fatherhood begins at the moment of birth. My theory is that fatherhood doesn't really begin until a man rolls up a sleeve, sticks it down into that cold toilet water, and pulls out a handful of Lincoln logs. Well, if he's lucky, they're Lincoln logs, right? It's sort of dark in some of those bathrooms. So I started writing about fatherhood, and that was it.
And that was it. And we're happy that you did. Thank you, DL. Let's take a moment right now to look back at Erma's spectacular life and legacy before we move forward with the program. We asked an old friend and neighbor of hers to give a special message. Here is Phil Donahue.
In 1961 in Centerville, Ohio, on Cushwa Drive, I lived diagonally across the street from the bomb. We were all 30-something, and we're making about $15,000 a year, and after you paid the pediatrician, you still had a little walking around money. We all had stair-step kids, and most of us were Catholic. And the most fun that was to be had on Cushwa Drive in Centerville, where incidentally there are some places where the grass is greener than at other places. The most fun you could have was at the Bombecks. Erma would not let you fail. No matter what the joke may have been, she was the most generous audience, then and now and forever. She was working for the Kettering Oakwood Times, if you can call an occasional column working. And after we would entertain each other in our homes, it was usually we all had the same house. It was a flat house. 15-5, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and the fireplace was extra, $700. Everybody had early American decor at that time. I had an American eagle from Sears over the fireplace. Not brass, black, they were cheaper. Bombecks had beams in the ceiling. I mean, real, early American beams, perfectly mitered. You kept looking for Martha Washington in her home. Bill Bombeck made those beams all by himself. I envied those beams so much. It explains why my relationship with Bill throughout my adult life has been so difficult. But it was this spirit of the time that lived in the work of Erma Bombeck since 1961. And that itself is a remarkable thing when you realize what's happened to us since then. While we were everything that our parents prayed that we would be, Our parents sacrificed for us, and in 1961 we had achieved more than they had ever dreamed. We were making more money than they had ever made. And then somebody killed our president, and we lost a war, and the Japanese took over automotive engineering, and a president resigned in disgrace, and we looked up to discover that we were prepared for a world that never materialized. And while the cities were burning and all this was happening to us, there was one constant in our culture, and it was Erma Bombeck. Her spirit never flagged. Her humor never waned. Her life shone out from millions of refrigerator doors. Just one of the many venues that Erma found herself in and allowed her work to reach the heart of countless numbers of readers around the world. She became an historic figure of publishing and of newspapering. It is not so much that she was the best, she was the only. And there is no other time when the phrase is more appropriate to say than now. We shall never see her likes again. We shall never know her unique brilliance, her insight, and mostly her generosity. She is the modern Catholic woman. She is the married once faithful wife who got more fun out of writing about infidelity than would be approved by the early church. And she was absent pretense. She was real. And she brought us all down to earth, gently, generously, and with brilliant humor. She is a 20th century political figure. And when the scholars gather hundreds of years from now to learn about us, they can't know it all if they don't read Erma. And it's for these and all those other reasons that I feel so blessed to have known this woman who made me a better person. Not an easy task. I am so, so grateful to her and join you in mourning her passing. But she will live. She will live forever.
What a wonderful eulogy for a wonderful woman. We want to thank the Bombeck family for sharing that with us. Bill met Erma when they both worked at the old Dayton Journal-Herald newspaper. Not long after that, they started their family in Centerville. I guess we want to know some dirt about this. Bill, tell us a little bit about your courting days and how it all came about, this relationship.
Some dirt.
National Enquirer stuff. No. The good stuff.
Well, I want to correct Phil's thing first, if I could.
Okay.
He may have been making $15,000 a year, but I was teaching school and painting houses like $6,000 a year. So I don't know where he got that from. All the things he said about Erma, I'll agree, but I have a problem with that.
With the monetary aspect of it all.
Yes. Yeah, I met Erma. Actually, she worked on the Dayton Herald, and I worked on the Dayton Journal. Now, the Journal was a morning paper, the Herald was an afternoon paper, and our paths would cross. I'd come in the afternoon, and she'd be leaving. And one of the things we shared was we got to cut up the mats for the funny papers. She was a copy girl, and I was a copy boy, and that's when I met her. And she had a co-op job where she alternated every 2 weeks with another student from Patterson, a Dolly Fellow. I remember her name, too. And Erma used to remind me sometimes that I remember Dolly Fellow too well. But anyway, she was 16 years old, and I was 6. It sounds like
The song.
Sound of Music. I was 16.
Going on 17.
And actually, we did have a couple of dates. And when I was in the service, Erma was a prolific writer. She even wrote me all kinds of letters when I was overseas, and I wrote back. And when I came home from the service, then I began to see her on a more serious basis. We got married in 1949. So, from 16 to 40, it was about 20 years old at the time.
And what a wonderful life you had together.
Yes, we did.
And we're going to share more of that coming up. There's also a man who shared Erma's life, Aaron Priest, her literary agent. And boy, that's a tough role to be in. I mean, you have a wonderful talent, and you need to market her just the proper way. How did you meet her, and did you know that the relationship was just going to kind of take off from there?
Well, actually, I first met Erma in 1967 when I was a sales rep for Doubleday, and she had come down for the book and author luncheon. But actually, in a way, I met her before I met her, because 8 months before that, I was in a bookstore, and it was January, and I was asking, you know, normally you go into the store after Christmas and find out, you know, to replenish the cookbooks, dictionaries, etc. And as I was on my way out the door, the woman said, oh yeah, she said, I want 10 more copies of At Wit's End. At which point I did an about face and said, what did you say? Because this woman wouldn't have ordered 10 copies of The Godfather. And then she started to tell me about this wonderful book. So I went into the next store and I said, you know, now I was very smart. I said, by the way, how'd you do with At Wit's End? And oh, yeah, great. And this kept happening. So when the local, I think it was a Brandeis group or whoever was having this big book and author luncheon, I suggested Erma is one of our writers, and that would be appropriate. And then, of course, when the local paper, the Dallas Times-Herald, chimed in, that's how Erma came to Dallas, and that's when I met Erma.
And it's been wonderful ever since.
It certainly was.
What a wonderful relationship. And we'll hear more from you later, and I thank you for that. You know, the next guy up, Bill Keene. You know his name probably, but if you don't, do you know he has a spyglass and he looks into your window and he details your life in a comic strip daily, the things that happen to you, because guess what? They happen to him. He's known to millions of us as a cartoonist behind the Family Circus. Bill, what a pleasure to have you here, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna.
Tell us a little bit about the snapshots of family life as we all live it, that you do.
Well, my association with Erma began many, many years ago when she wrote me a letter from Bellbrook and said that she enjoyed my cartoons. There was one cartoon I did that brought a tear to her eye, and you know, that's the one thing a cartoonist doesn't like to hear. He makes somebody cry. But I couldn't believe I had this letter from Erma Bombeck, whose column I was reading in the Arizona Republic at the time, and I said, I thought, well, this is great. And she told me how much she enjoyed my Family Circus cartoons. I wrote back to her and I said, Erma, I think you are the funniest lady and the greatest humor writer, bar none. Maybe Art Buchwald, but... and I said, maybe sometime in the future we can do a book together. And she wrote back a one-word letter. It said, when?
Not even yes, but when.
When, that was it. And we talked by telephone and decided that we would do a book. And we did. It was called Just Wait Till You Have Children of Your Own. And it did very well, and it was a delight. And I guess I'm the only guy on the stage besides Bill Bombeck who's ever been between the covers with Erma Bombeck.
Now, that's the National Enquirer stuff I was asking you about. Bill, I'm sure you want to comment on that, but we also want to ask you, is it true that Bill Keene had something to do with your finally moving to Arizona?
Well, yes, he used to tell us about how wonderful the weather was, and we decided that Erma had been out a number of times and given speeches. People were very gracious in Arizona, and we thought, well, we could do something different here, and we decided to make the move. And we moved into Arizona in June of 1971. I think we arrived there and the temperature was 110 degrees. And Bill Keene had put a sign out in the front yard saying, welcome to Arizona, Bombeck. And I think we made a mistake here with this. Yes, he had a lot to do with it.
But you didn't make a mistake, did you?
No, we don't think so.
Turned out to be
There went the neighborhood.
You can't have everything, Bill and Bill. Now it's time to meet one of Erma's best friends. It is Liz Carpenter, and she is a wonderful woman, and we're so proud to have you with us today. Liz, thank you so much.
I'm thrilled to be here.
You know, one of the best descriptions of you comes from Erma herself. Quoting her, she says, no one remains the same after meeting Liz. She makes Auntie Mame look like a shut-in.
I wish.
What a wonderful life and what wonderful times you shared with our Erma. Did you ever see her worried?
Only once, and she was not so worried as she was excited. She'd been invited by the city of Phoenix. The Pope was coming, and she was to hold the crowd from a podium while the Pope mobile came slowly through a massive crowd. Well, she was worried about how she'd do that. And so I said, well, you could read all of your columns. And her eyes lit up, and she said, and my 12 books? And they lit up even more. Well, as it turned out, the Pope didn't quite, he evoked more applause that stopped everything, and Erma didn't get a word in. I'm sure that if she had, she would have held on to that mic, and she would have taken 2 archbishops and a gallon of holy water to rest her from it. But it was a thrill for her to meet the Pope, and in the exhibits here at the University of Dayton, you can see a picture of Erma looking very blessed.
I bet a lot of people didn't intimidate her, but I saw her eyes were as big as saucers in that picture.
Yes.
What a wonderful picture. You know, how did you two meet?
Well, we met really when in the middle of the women's movement in the 1970s, and I called her and asked her if she'd come down to a big conference we were having at the LBJ Library, and she did, and she was terrific. And so then when we were trying to get the Equal Rights Amendment into the Constitution, we're still waiting, she and I went out on the ERA trail. On weekends, she could peel off, and we'd go to some unratified state, and she made it fun, fighting for a cause. I remember in Little Rock, Arkansas, we were riding, we'd worked all day lobbying, hoping we could bring in Arkansas, and on our way to dinner that night, about 10 o'clock, it poured rain. The landmark, we were to look for a red mailbox, and so I stuck my head out the window. We were starving, and when I did, she said, watch those $2 permanents, Liz, they frizz. But she was that way through Florida, through Iowa, where we tried to keep it from being rescinded, and we did that. But I'll tell you about that along the way. I want to hear from some of these others.
Oh, yes, but we have enjoyed hearing from you, and I've got to ask you this one question before we leave you. Is it true the two of you were known as Thelma and Louise when it came to the ERA
Thelma
trail?
and Louise of the ERA, and if we had had a weapon, we would have used it. A rolling pin, a hat pin, we could have used it on some of those Southern legislators.
Liz, I'm never going to mess with you, darling. I'm never going to mess with you. It's wonderful to see you.
I have a little
Bill.
story I think that would fit into her travels with the ERA. After Erma had made a number of trips, she sort of got a pattern that Liz would follow. And one of the things that Liz used to like to do would be to have the driver in the limo driving Liz and Erma and maybe some other people to the next juncture where they were going to give a big speech, and they were sure they were going to get this amendment through the state. And be a long trip, and it's sort of boring and everything, and Liz would sit in the back of the limo, and she would look around, and she would finally say, well, now what we're going to do, we're all going to sit here, and we're all going to relate our first sexual experience. And this would be bound to get a rise out of the driver. You can almost see the guy lurching forward in the car. And
Well,
this was before I knew Liz.
Well, gee, in the spirit of Erma, Liz, I think we'd like to know your first sexual experience. No, we'll let that pass.
Yes.
We don't have that much time, but thank you. Thank you very much. You know, another of Erma's friends happens to be Lee Salem, Vice President and Editorial Director of Universal Press Syndicate, which syndicated Erma's column. And Lee, I'm not going to ask you about your sex life. You're safe, okay?
Thank you.
Is it true, though, that when asked what you do for a living, your wife and children often say that you read comics for a living?
That's true. It's interesting the way the family perspective of my career has evolved. When my kids were 8 or 10, it was, my dad reads comics for a living. And if you bring the likes of a Bill Watterson or a Gary Larson or Lynn Johnston over for dinner, that's excitement for them, and they're celebrities in their school. By the time they're 16 or 18, it's, my dad reads comics for a living. And That's maintained to this day, and even though they're older. My wife has a real job. She's a college professor in mathematics. And her view is very similar, except it's a little more quizzical. My husband reads comics for a living and he gets paid for it. But I really overcame that hurdle when I came home that day and announced that we were fortunate enough to be able to syndicate Erma's column. We had a big reception for her in Kansas City. The whole staff was there. I think even the mayor and some other people turned out. Aaron was there. And I came home that night, and she actually called her mother and said, I met Erma Bombeck, so I knew I had made it with my family.
Oh, that's wonderful. We're glad that Erma did that for you. She's done a lot for all of us. Well, you know, I was just thinking back about the time I met her. And I was actually interviewing Oprah Winfrey. And I was sent to Chicago to interview Oprah. And I remember sitting in the waiting room, the green room, for her to get done. And in walks Erma Bombeck. And I said, hold the presses. I'm a Dayton girl, and I've got to have Erma. So we spent a wonderful time in the green room together. And then all of a sudden, I said, would you mind if I did an interview with you? So I got the cameraman all together, and we're ready, and we're videoing the whole thing. And then the secretary consultant said, Miss Winfrey will see you now. And I said, I'm not done with Erma yet. And Erma said, you better go. You go. That's right. I said, no, you're more important to me. We finish this, then I go. And you know what? To Oprah's credit, she thought it was funny. So we thank you for that. And what a joy it was to spend time with her that day. John McNeil. Well, what can I say about John? One of the founders of the syndication company that has now grown into the world's largest independent newspaper syndicate, Andrews McNeil Universal Press Syndicate, publishing the work of more than 125 creators and writers. Whew, John, makes me tired just talking about you. You've got a big job.
Well, that's why I say I'm only 22 years old, and that's what, that's what happens to you in this business. But yeah, nobody knows they're going to be. When I was born, I never thought I was going to be a syndicate man unless I took a wrong turn. And but thank God I took that turn. And this man down here at the end, not Lee, but next to him, was my target. Because if you're going to be in the syndicate business, you got to have the very best. And the very best was Erma Bombeck. But how does a little syndicate like ours, started back in 1970, achieve such? So I kept thinking about how I could impact on Aaron. I knew everybody else was offering all kinds of monies and all kinds of material things, so I turned to the spiritual. And I first sent him 50 Hail Marys, 25 Our Fathers, and 10 Glory Bees. That didn't do it. So I increased that to about 50,000 each, and by gosh, I brought him along. And in 1988, we reached one of our great plateaus by being able to say, we syndicate Erma Bombeck.
And we're so happy you did, because it really has made a lifetime of pleasure for all of us who have refrigerators at home. I don't know of anybody else who universally has so much put on a refrigerator. It's like a piece of artwork in a museum when you see people's refrigerators all decorated up with all these words of wisdom and the pearls that make us smile. One creative artist, the type that John McNeil helps along, is another one of Dayton's own. He's verbose, he's lovable, he's crazy, and he's wonderful. He's the Pulitzer Prize winning cartoonist Mike Peters.
I saw her move from a local, wonderful diamond that no one knew anything about to the giant that she became. And what her magic was that she knew who she was. That was her magic. She never, she never believed her own press. She, in her heart, was that wonderful wife, mother, homemaker that she started out as, and that she knew that the homemaker, the mother, the wife needed to have a voice in newspapers or in television, and there had not been one. But she didn't get into it because because there wasn't one there. She just very instinctively did it. I called her up one time, and I said, after she got syndicated, I said, listen, is there any way, my mom had this TV show in St. Louis for about 25 years, and I called up Erma and I said, you know, how did you get syndicated? I would love for my wife, for my mom to get syndicated. And she said, she said, "The heck with your mom, you get syndicated." Now, I hadn't even thought about it yet. I had just started in as a cartoonist for the Dayton Daily News, but she was one of the first people who ever said, "No, you should be syndicated, young man."
And that is Mike Peters, and we thank you for that. Right now, we're going to turn it back over to you guys because you are a wealth of information for us right now to give us your very special memories and stories. And Matt, we want to go back with you. It's been a while since we've heard from you. I heard that you could never persuade your mother to write with a computer. And in looking at some of the exhibits here at the University of Dayton, you can see the manuscript, the text, all done out. It looks like it's an old Smith Portable or something. What did she use, and how did you ever get her to step into the new millennium?
She used an IBM Selectric, and I never got into the 20th century. I tried. I sat her down, and I said, when I first got a computer, I sat her down, and I said, "This is great, and this is going to change your life. This is going to make your life so much easier. Watch this." And she said, "Okay." So I sat down and I hit a few buttons and I typed out a sentence, and she said, "Where's the paper?" And I said, "It's coming. Just you just have to be patient. Type another sentence." And we typed another sentence, and she said, "Where's the paper? How can I hold it in my hand?" I said, "Well, it's coming. Don't worry." And finally, we typed out a whole column, and we went to print it out, and the printer jammed, and there was no paper. And she said, "See, I told you. These things just do not work. They're not creative."
Well,
and
in many ways, your mother was an old-fashioned girl. I remember once in Florida on the ERA trail, we were given what I call a plexiglass helicopter, a see-through helicopter. We got in, and she said, "Did we wear our best underwear?" She was full of that. I mean, out in Iowa, where we're trying to keep the amendment from being rescinded, for some reason, Erma arrived with a suitcase that was full of some leftover clothes, socks of Bill Bombeck. And so in going across, we were in a great motorhome, and we were hitting towns where they were having fundraisers, women's groups. And so we auctioned off Bill's underwear, his socks, and brought a pretty price too, Bill.
I hope they were clean. Were they clean?
You really did have some fun, didn't you?
Loved it. And she was such a good person because, like Mike Peters said, every housewife identified with her. And, with Gloria Steinem and Bella Abzug, you weren't always in with the housewives. But Erma took us right in with the laundromat crowd, and they loved her. They were lined up for her. They believed her. And she believed in them. She said, "I have a lot of respect for these women." And it always was, there was a loving manner in the way she presented the arguments for what she called the 16 little words that mean one size fits all. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex. Someday we'll get it. When Jesse Helms goes on.
And Aaron, I understand you have something to add to that.
I just think that the amazing thing about Erma was everybody knows that the enormous appeal she had to housewives, but what people don't realize is it wasn't just housewives. I can remember being at a party, and a woman who was a very prominent attorney came over and said, you represent Erma Bombeck? And I said, "Yeah." And then she started asking me questions. She said, she said, "She reads my mail." She said, "I don't know how she does it, but she reads my mail." And I think that was the great thing, because as Erma grew older and the kids grew up, her columns changed and she adapted, and she was always right on. As she once said, she said, I can't talk about kids in diapers because people know I don't have kids in diapers anymore. But she adapted, and that was one of the amazing things about her.
She was always able to keep fresh.
That's right.
And that's why her columns are still very timeless for all of us. But I understand she was a member of a club that wouldn't have D.L. Stewart in it. Is that true, D.L.?
Well, this, you know, I mean, Erma was a wonderful person to me, and she was my inspiration, and she was my mentor sometimes when I needed help, and she encouraged me when I needed it, but she let me down in this one. I heard about this Academy of Humor thing, and it's an Art Buchwald thing, and Calvin Trillett and Mark Russell. And then one year I hear Dave Barry gets invited to this thing. I'm thinking, well, now, I've been around longer than Dave Barry, and I'm taller than him. I think I should be in this club. So I call Erma, and I beg, and I whine, and I whimper, will you intercede on my behalf to get me into this club? And she said, well, I don't know, send me some columns. I'll send them on to Art and see what happens. So I sent her some of the columns. She sent them on to Art Buchwald, apparently. He must have read them. He calls Erma. He said, well, you know, Erma, it's not just based on writing, it's also based on personality. He said, tell me, is this Stewart guy, is he as funny in person as he is in his column? And Erma said, just exactly.
Oops.
I think that year the only one they inducted was Rush Limbaugh. I'm not sure.
Well, you know, I was talking to Art the other night, and he told me that the reason that they invited Erma was so that she could make the coffee and clean up after them. Is there any truth to that? But you could take that job.
I could probably do that. Please, please, Art, I know you're out there.
Bill Keene. Bill, you know, when we're talking about Erma being able to keep her columns fresh, you're able to do the same thing. As your children have grown, though, how do you keep the focus? Because you still have a lot of youth in your column. Your kids are growing older, so what do you use for inspiration?
Well, our 5 children grew up, and they all have children of their own. Now we have 9 grandchildren I follow around for ideas. They think Granddad's following around lovingly, and I'm out to exploit them. You know, do something funny, you know, say something cute. But I really have kept the cartoon up into the year 2000 by doing things that are fresh, and Erma always did that in her column. She always had, right now she would be writing stuff about Harry Potter and doing the things that are Pokemon, and it's what really makes people come back the next day. I used the Bombecks family as a neighbor in the family circus. I had the snow all over the ground, and in the backyard, the kids had tread all of the snow tracks around, the sleds and all of that, but next door, it's virgin snow. And Billy's saying to Mommy, all our snow is used up. Can we use Mrs. Bombeck's snow? You know? and I did cartoons many times. In fact, I had one right here that is a cartoon that I ran on Halloween. And it shows Billy and the kids dressed up, and Billy's saying to one of his friends as they're out trick-or-treating, and Billy's saying, don't waste your time at the Bombecks. They're giving out carrot sticks. Now, to show what kind of a gal Erma was, the next morning I went to take some mail out to my mailbox, and in there is a bunch of carrots with a note that says, these were left over from last night.
You know, Bill, I'm beginning to suspect something. I'm beginning to suspect that you might have invited them to come to Arizona for fodder for your column.
I certainly did.
Now, Matt, wait a minute. You know, as we were talking about this, I got to thinking about my life is such that I'm under a microscope a lot of the time. But usually it's for good reasons. I can put on a good front out there. But when you do something, whether it be potty training or whatever, I mean, it's all over the place. I mean, the whole nation knows all your little secrets. How was that growing up?
Well, I'm through potty training now.
And we're all happy for that.
It's a big step for me. You know, as kids growing up, we as little kids, we didn't read the column. So we really had no idea what she was doing. I remember going, you know, to school when I was 7 or 8, and they said, you know, what does your mother do all day? She closes the door, and I said, well, she's a syndicated communist. This was 1965, so it didn't go over well. You know, but as kids, we, you know, she never used first names. And since I have a brother, I can always blame him, say it was him. My sister was left out to dry. But you know, as kids growing up, we were just kids, and she was our mom, and you know, she had a day job.
Did you have any rules, though? Was anything off limits? I mean, did you work out a deal with her?
Yeah, when she was working, yeah.
But I mean, was there anything that was too personal to go in that she thought might have been cute and had a fight with her to keep out of the column?
No, you know, never. I mean, she always managed to, you know, her humor was never mean-spirited or
No,
exploitive.
it never
And it was always done in good fun, and I think it taught us to, you know, not take ourselves seriously, and the family so seriously. So.
Well, you know, that's the thing that you bring up, and Bill, I'm going to ask you about that too, is that when you see so many of the comics today, or the humorists, or different people that are involved in humor, they take the easy way out, the cheap shot, the attack type of humor. And it seems to me that real talent, you know, goes in a different direction. How do you feel about that in the job she did in that area?
Well, I feel fine about that, but I'd rather answer another question.
Oh, okay.
He made me think of a great story that involves my other son, Andy Bombeck. And Andy's a school teacher. And this was fairly recent when this happened. Andy, like many school teachers, is always looking for a way to either have a lot of films or have a field day or some way to get out of doing a lesson plan and teaching. So frequently would bring in other people to come to his class and explain the world of work. So on one occasion, he decided he would ask his mother to come in to explain to his class in school the world of writing, you know, literature, composition, and so on. So he asked Erma to come to the classroom and do this. And she said, yeah, I'll do that. And I told her, I said, well, you're nuts. I said, you've got so much to do and you're so busy. Why do you want to do that? She says, no, that's okay. I'll go out and do that. So she went out to Andy's class and came at the time she was supposed to, knocked on the door, went into the classroom, and Andy introduced her and says, now this is my mother. She's a writer. She writes books and she writes columns for the newspaper. And she's going to talk to us today about writing. And the first thing she said, well, what do you really want to know about Mr. Bombeck when he was a little boy? And the class loved it. Andy wasn't that crazy about the whole idea because that's what she proceeded to do then. Because these little kids all started holding up their hands, asking all these questions. And she gave them the whole lowdown on Andy, on Mr. Bombeck, you know. So I thought I'd chime in with that story since he's talking about it.
That's a wonderful story.
Yes.
But you know,
Now, I forget your original question.
That's all right. Who cares? Wait. Doesn't matter. That was better. But you know, that brings me to another thought, too. Did her columns cause you any concern at all, or was everything okay? I mean, you were just thrilled for her talent or ability, or did you ever feel like it was too much prying in an area? Or could she edit herself? That's a good question, I suppose.
Well, you know, I used to tell people all the time that Erma was a great writer of fiction. And people got some kind of idea that here I was in this household, and I'm just about the funniest guy in the world. I mean, you know, I'm saying all these clever things, and I have these great quotes all the time. Or I'm the guy that's sitting home, I'm watching these, you know, 3 days of football over Thanksgiving and New Year's. And actually, I can't stand to watch televised football myself. But she had everybody believing I was sort of Mr. Everyman in the country.
Do you feel
And I think
pressured?
that's the way she sort of related to a lot of her readers, that she was Mr. Every Woman. And so I think people got that idea.
So in other words, when you walked into a room and
was-
people didn't know you, didn't feel pressured to be on?
Now, they did this with her. I mean, many, many times. One of the things that used to happen to her when she'd go out and speak, so many times while she was being introduced, the person who's making the introduction would spend so much time going over Erma's material and telling all these funny stories that by the time they got finished with the introduction, the audience was exhausted laughing at the introduction. So that frequently would happen to her, that other people felt like they had to be very funny. And she would just tell, you know, her idea was, well, just relax, you know, just be yourself. Don't worry about it. You don't have to be on.
That was just so wonderful. And Lee, I think you can attest to this as well, as when you met Erma, you immediately felt her warmth envelop you. You felt the humor. And the question I have for you is, how do you edit somebody like Erma? How do you go to her and say, well, I think this should be cut, or, I mean, that's her life. How do you handle that tricky situation?
Well, experience taught us very quickly you do it very gingerly, I can assure you. She was a pro, and she was a craftswoman and was a master of prose. By the time she came to us, she was a household name. So we had to think, now what editor are we going to assign to work with her on the feature, which at that point was 3 times a week. And so we picked a young man who was an expert grammarian, a new composition, had edited the likes of Dear Abby, Bill Buckley, Gary Wills, some pretty prominent names. And the two of them sat down on the phone to try to work out some ground rules. And Alan started with the first column and said, in the second paragraph, I think there's an agreement problem. And Alan explained to me later there was kind of this lengthy silence on the other end of the phone. And Erma's advice, which we all took, was, number 1, don't ask me to explain my jokes. And number 2, don't turn me into an English teacher. So we accepted her humor for what it was because it was so appealing to people, and we did not try to clean up her copy too much.
And John, would you attest to, oh, sorry, Liz, go ahead.
Bill was talking about football, and I think that's when Erma Bombeck issued a rule. If you have watched 48 hours straight of football, you could be declared legally dead. Every wife understood that.
Wonderful, wonderful.
And Erma always based her stuff on things that had happened at home. Bill is a runner. He would be out running, and I used to see him running on the canal, and not on the canal, along the canal, and although he could run on the canal. But, and I heard Erma say that the only time that she would take up jogging, the only reason she would take up jogging was so she could hear heavy breathing again.
Bill. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, she always made the observation that she never saw anybody who was ever doing anything like this ever have a smile on their face. There were always a grimace, so that wasn't anything she was going to do.
Well, you know who has a smile on his face a lot is John down there on the end. John, when you're working with a talent as big as Erma, what special challenges do you face?
Well, you just, thank God you got Erma Bombeck, a challenge. You take those kind of challenges any day. But I'd like to finish a little story that brings both why this Erma Bill team was such a fantastic combination. And it was a memory that my wife and I will long cherish. But I hit a certain milestone birthday back in 1996. And we said we better get away for this one. So we'll go down to the Super Bowl down in Phoenix and just have a dinner at a restaurant that Susan had picked out. So we did so and walk into the restaurant, go to our table, this little table here to the left, and there is Erma and Bill. And it was all planned. And during the course of the evening, which was a wonderful evening, I mean, spending your birthday with Erma Bombeck and Bill Bombeck was something very special, much more than I deserved. And during the course of the evening, Erma picks up this big box, and she shoves it at me. She's always shoving things at me, shoving the contract at me, shoving this at me, shoving that at me. And I shoved it over, and I took it, and oh God, I picked it up. And it was heavy, terribly heavy. And of course, going through my mind is, how will I get this back to Kansas City? Now, Erma, in her own perception and everything, knew exactly what I was thinking. Before I could say a word, she says, John, we will mail it back. Don't worry about it. So I open the box up, and I take out this big, heavy rock. I said, oh, Erma, it's wonderful. I said, you're always so sweet and endearing. You always think of the nicest things. That's very nice. Sue and I were just talking last week. Wouldn't it be great to have a nice, heavy rock in our room? But then they had a little card that they shoved over. And it was, when you find yourself between the rock and the hard place.
Oh.
And signed Erma and Bill. And then I turned the rock over, and on it was engraved, laugh.
Oh.
And that was in January of 1996, and I put that on my desk. And just 3 months later, we didn't have Erma. And before that, afterwards, every time I get into a tight situation with, which I do quite often because I don't know how to handle these things, that's why I got Salem. You put your hand on that rock and you say laugh. And it's something that, will long live with us and something that experience.
What a wonderful message she left you with, laugh. I mean, if she had to leave it for any of us, that's what she would have said, laugh, enjoy life. And you know what else? Erma has a very generous spirit that lives on, her generous spirit. And I understand, Liz, she was generous to you. Didn't she get you a book deal or have something to do with one of your books?
Absolutely. I had written a piece called The Silver Lining that Texas Monthly used, and so I wanted Erma to see it, and I sent it to a copy of the article. And she called me up and said, that's not just an article, that's a book. And I'm going to see that Aaron Priest comes down and sees you. And so Aaron came reluctantly, but I will tell you, I had everything waiting for him. And he said, well, we're going to put this up for auction. This is music to a writer's ears. And so he had it going for about 3 or 4 days with people bidding on my immortal words. And finally, though, it got down to where he was going to give it to Simon & Schuster for $425,000, the most money I'd ever heard of that wasn't Confederate money. And so anyway, so the kicker, though, was I had to have it done in 1 year. Well, I was scared to death, and I happened to be home alone. I was so scared, and a delivery man brought something to the door, and I had to tell somebody this was so exciting, and I think I grabbed him and kissed him and told him. But then about this time, an old friend and a friend of Irma's, too, they had done a soft shoe together to raise money in Austin for a lectureship in my name. Cactus Power called me. And I said, God, I'm scared to death. I have to have all of this done in 1 year. And he said, I said, I can't get a cold. I can't let anything happen. And he said, listen, you can't even get those massages you like so much. They might break your brittle bones. But anyway, it came out. And Aaron, I hope you got all your money's worth.
Listen, I even got a case of scotch from you. That was even better.
So, Aaron, how'd you feel when you got the phone call and Irma says, I need you to do a favor for a friend, and it turned out to be a favor for you as well?
Well, it was, actually, Liz and I had connected many years before, so it was, it was great. Actually, one of the things, when John was talking about the rock, one of the things that really is a gift, and not using it as a double entendre, but Irma had a great gift for giving presents. It wasn't just, she had a very generous spirit, but she also had an amazing knack for finding something for somebody that really was special. Mm-hmm. I mean, she was, I don't know how she did it. She used catalogs. I mean, Bill would know better. I mean, she used to joke about people who had their, Christmas shopping done by the 4th of July, but I think she was a closet one and just wouldn't admit it. But she really came up with some amazingly good presents that I knew of for different people, myself included, that were just really meaningful. I mean, she would just know how to pick something out, and it was, it was always, it was her. I mean, you just knew that it was, it was really special.
It has to be a very thoughtful person and somebody who really cares deeply to find a present that suits somebody else so well, don't you think?
For sure. I mean, that was, it was, she really thought about it. And the thing is, many times she would give you something you didn't even know you needed until you had it.
I guess, DL, what gift does Irma leave with you?
Well, she gave me her time for one thing, and she gave me her inspiration for another thing. The first time I dealt with her, I asked her if I imposed on her. I said, would you write a foreword for my book? Mm-hmm. And she was gracious enough to do that. And my concept with my publisher was, foreword by Erma Bombeck, book by Dale Stewart, like that. And I figured we could sell millions that way, but it didn't work. But she was always generous. I met her the first time in 1976. The following year, I met her for the second time. We happened to be getting on a plane from Dayton to going back to Phoenix, and I was going on to somewhere else. Got on the plane, and of course, she's going on the syndicate, so she's flying first class. And I'm going on the Dayton newspaper, so I'm flying coach. We get on the plane. I said, well, you want to sit with me? And she said, what, sit with the little people? So she sat in first class. I sat in coach. Plane took off. The instant the seatbelt light went off, there came Erma from first class back to sit with me in coach. And I thought, that is a first-class lady.
It is. John, how about your moment? You mentioned the laugh and the rock. What else has she left you with?
Oh, I think that when I look forward to the telephone calls. We used to go back and forth on things, but the greatest thing about Erma is that, you know, she would be so funny over the telephone, and just talking, just conversing. And you think, okay, most times you see somebody that can do that over the phone, and you read their column the next day, and it's two different people. But not with Erma. It was just, she was such the authentic thing. She just, you know, she was so real. And I'll never forget, I mean, wherever you would be, if Erma Bombeck called, you'd trip over every desk and everything just to get that phone call, because that was the treat of treats. But it just came across so often that she's just so genuine, that there was no, the Erma over the phone was the same Erma in print. And that's a special, special quality.
DL, you
Just
have
a note on that, John. Also, not only did she make you laugh all the time, she laughed at what you had to say also. And that I think made her special.
And the Irish are really bad news on that. Right. You know, I tried to think I was really a funny man, and I was trying to be syndicated.
Yeah, by the time we got to Phoenix on the flight, I thought, I'm Johnny Carson for crying out loud. And no, I wasn't.
No, DL, we thought you were. No, seriously. Bill, what about you? What did she leave you with?
Well, Erma has, she wrote once that Bill Keene makes his living doing what other men are thrown in jail for, peeking in windows. And I was flattered by that. But, you know, something that I think I was reminded of when John mentioned the rock, and it's a very tender thing and a beautiful, beautiful thought that I think Bill should tell us about when he brought this mammoth boulder from Arizona and put it at the cemetery where Erma is buried. I went out there today, had my picture taken alongside of it. It's the red rock that's so familiar to anybody in Arizona, and right up by their home is this red rock country. And Bill, how did you get that rock? You didn't carry that yourself, did you?
We tried to check it through on the airlines, but they wouldn't accept it. No, I had kind of made up my mind. There was two reasons for the rock. First of all, when the bishop in Phoenix found out that we were going to bury Erma in Dayton, Ohio, rather than in Phoenix, he was very unhappy with me. And he thought, how could you do this? We had great presence in Arizona. I love the area, and Bill pointed out it's a tremendous beauty and so on. But when I came to Dayton and made up my mind that I thought Erma belonged here instead of Arizona, for two reasons. First of all, it's close to University of Dayton. And Woodland Cemetery had been a cemetery all of our lives. Erma lived nearby. She grew up near there. I grew up on Holly Avenue, not far from Woodland Cemetery. And this seemed a really appropriate place. But after we had made the decision and had her buried here, I felt there's kind of something missing here that we need from Arizona. So I kept looking around the property in the area I lived and trying to figure out what is it that I could bring that would be Arizona. And I found this about a 12-ton rock in my neighbor's yard. And it looked like I didn't think I'd be capable of sneaking down there at night and moving that 12-ton rock away. So I talked to my neighbor, whose name was Love, Dick Love. That's very appropriate, isn't it? And he was very gracious about it, even though it was part of
yard. He said, why, yeah, he would do this. And I said, well, I'd be willing to pay you. He says, well, you figure out what you think the rock is worth. Pay me that, and I'll give it to one of Irma's charities. And I thought, well, that sounds fair. So the day we went down to really finish off the negotiations, we decided that we needed to see the next door neighbor so he'd know there's a big crane going to come in here and early in the morning and pick up this 12-ton rock and create a lot of havoc on the street. And I got down first before my neighbor Dick Love showed up. And I saw the other neighbor. And so I'm talking to him, Jim, and I said, well, you know, we're here, we're going to get the rock. And I said, you know, I've been working, negotiating with Dick Love about it. He says, that's not his rock, that belongs to me. Mr. Love was sure it was his rock. And I said, it's yours? And he said, yes, that's on my property. He says, I built this house, and I know about that rock. And I thought, oh, I got a problem here. And I said, well, he said, you can have it.
That's nice.
It's fine. And by the time Mr. Love came, why, his neighbor explained to him that it was not his rock to give away, but the other rock. Anyway, we have it over in Woodland now. And it's parked in front of her grave. And I think it's kind of helping to hold down the spinning that's going on over there right now.
You know what's interesting is that 2 days before this event, some of Irma's fans approached me and said that they go to the cemetery and they find solace in that great big stone. So you've done them a favor as well as everybody else.
Well, we love it. The best thing about it that I've seen so far is Jim Sandergren, who's out here in the audience, I think, is the arboretist over at Woodland. He sent me a great number of pictures of a bunch of little kids crawling all over this thing and hanging on the side of it. So I think that's just what she would want.
She would like that. Doesn't say laugh on the bottom, though, does it?
No, doesn't say anything on it. And we're not sure what we're going to say over there. But we need to get a marker. We're working now on a headstone that we should have there.
Oh, excellent.
So people can see her name on that.
And let us know as soon as you decide. Liz, what about you?
Well, I think I loved her advice. I love the fact that she could lift my spirits. I can still hear laughter ring in many places. I always will. But one of the times where she was, you know, gung-ho to go along with a gag, we didn't think of it as a gag. She called it a gag. But the Southwest Conference on Aging wanted to give Irma an award. And she flinched at that. It was supposed to be that's not true, the things they say about aging. And so we finally got her with all of the staff putting their hands up in prayer, having a photo made. We pray for you to say yes. And she came to San Antonio. And she was fantastic. She got up and she said, you know, I think this is a case of mistaken identity. And if Willard Scott calls to wish me happy birthday, I'm going to report it as an obscene phone call. And she went on, but then she gave some marvelous advice to women. Don't delay your dreams. Go with your dreams. So many women will, one, blame their kids for stalling their dreams, but they will put them off. And she says, pick them up, you can go for it. And this needed to be said to women. And then it happened that week my oldest brother had died and left me 3 teenagers to raise. And so I told her, I said, do you think I'm crazy? They're 11, 14, 16. She said, if it's adventure you want, Liz, why don't you take a bungee cord and go to Mount Rushmore and tie it on Lincoln's Wharf and jump. And she followed it up with teenagers are hazardous to your health. But she also said, I'd love to talk to them sometime if you need me to. And she was always on tap to talk to anybody who needed it.
Well, thank you for that. That's wonderful to hear. Lee, what about you?
Go back to what I said earlier. She was a consummate professional. And I've dealt with a lot of writers and cartoonists, but she was the pro of pros. And late in her career, when she was battling the illness, there were times in which we had to interrupt service to the papers, and she was always worried about that. And it never occurred to her that we would send out repeats. You know, we assured her we could do that. It never occurred to her that we could continue charging papers. Her line to me was, well, I want to do what's right for my client newspapers. And she insisted that we do right, and I think that really marks her whole career in dealing with this column that marked so many people in such a positive way.
Aaron, final word?
Well, Liz said go for it. That was one of Erma's really favorite expressions, to go for it. And that was the way she was. It was just, you know, reach out and you know, live life and do it. And she was absolutely unsparing of her time. I was, you know, when you were talking about gifts, there were so many I couldn't think, but I think that the one that got me the most was, I guess I had an expression that I used to use a lot around her when something would come up and I'd say, not to worry. And along came, I guess it was Christmas or Hanukkah for me, and this package came and I opened it up, and she had actually crocheted just a plaque that was just not to worry. And I thought about the time that it had taken her, and I thought about the amount of things that were on this woman's plate, and there was just no gift that anybody could have given me that possibly could have meant more than this kind of time coming from Erma. It was just amazing.
You know what also is amazing? The fact that she brought all of us together, and you've all done such a wonderful job. And I'd like to end with you, Matt. What has your mother left you?
Well, you know, I think for us, I think the legacy that she's left has really been our family. You know, we're still, you know, very close, and we still laugh, and when we're together, and you know, we don't, you know, we haven't forgotten that, and that's not something that you know, you get in the last few months of someone's life. I mean, that's something that's over a lifetime that you get from someone, and you get from your mom. And it's not, I'm sure everyone has a mom, and that's what they get. And I think that's what she left for us.
And she loved you a lot. She loved all of you. And I thank you all for being
here. Yeah, the best, yeah.
She loved him best.
Mama always loved you best.
Well, we know everybody's read that column.
You've got your mother's humor, though. And thank you. As for Erma, what she gave me hope for a brighter tomorrow, and to help me believe in myself a little bit more with a real can-do attitude, and I thank her for that. And I thank all of you. I thank you in the audience. I thank you at home. And most of all, I thank you. What a cast of characters you are. It's been fun. Thank you. I'm Donna Jordan. Thank you for joining us. Oh, thank you. Take a bow.
Everybody will stand up and run to the exit and say, it's Dayton, Ohio.
Thank you all.